We are living in a moment of extraordinary danger, and how we respond to this moment will not only impact our lives, but will impact the lives of our kids and future generations.
That was US Senator Bernie Sanders speaking at a recent Fight Oligarchy rally, together with fellow progressive politician Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. He's been holding a series of these events on tour. They've been held in liberal battleground states and more Republican-leaning states. And the rallies are being held as Democrats consider how to reverse their fortunes following Donald Trump's victory in November's presidential race. Midterm elections are due next year, and there's an ongoing debate in the Democratic Party about how to counter Trump's Maga agenda. Well, Dr. Luke Winslow is an associate professor at Baylor University in the United States. He's also author of the book Oligarchy in America: Power, Justice and the Rule of the Few, which looks at how political and economic ideas have led to an ultra-rich class of oligarchs in the US. So welcome to DW. First of all, I suppose we should define our terms. Tell us what, and perhaps who, you're talking about when you talk about oligarchs in the US.
Now, oligarchy is best understood as the kind of the marriage or the combination of economic and political power. So you can have really wealthy people that aren't necessarily politically active, and you can also have politicians or people with a lot of political power that aren't necessarily rich. Oligarchy tries to explain kind of the confluence or the combination of political power with economic forces. So some obvious examples right now, probably Elon Musk would be the best example. But if you look at kind of throughout history, you can go back to the Gilded Age and you can look at people like Andrew Carnegie, Leland Stanford, and John D. Rockefeller.
And we're so used to hearing that word, oligarchs, used about Russia's political system, that it can come as a bit of a shock to hear it applied to the United States. How close are the parallels, would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the US, we're much more familiar or comfortable attaching oligarchy to kind of Eastern Europeans. So Roman Abramovich, is an oligarch. Alexander Smolenski is an oligarch. But it's much less likely to use that same description to describe someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. And there are some similarities, there are some important differences. The main similarity, I think it's most relevant for understanding what's happening in the US right now, is basically just using the immense resources of the nation state to enrich the ultra-rich oligarchic elites. So if you can use the nation state to maximize your profitability, it's a wonderful resource to do that. And that applies to Russia, it applies to the US, it doesn't really matter. And so we're seeing some of those, again, important differences. There are some, but the similarities are kind of coming into clear focus right now.
And is that because there are more of them and they are more obvious in the US at the moment, or have they always been there, but perhaps been quieter in pre-Trumpian times?
It's a really good question. They've always been there. Wealthy people have always understood the resources or the potential of the nation state to help them enrich themselves. So it's nothing new. This goes back a long way. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right in the sense that we in the US elected Donald Trump in large part because many voters perceive him to be a great businessman. And so we think that because he's a great businessman, he can also run the federal government in a competent way. And so oligarchy has always been in tension with the representative democracy. So that's not new. What Trump offers is kind of a vivid illustration of it, kind of right in front of our faces.
OK, so we have Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez on this Fight Oligarchy tour. Does that make them the voice of resistance to Trump and his rich backers, rather than the Democratic Party, or are they just making more noise about it?
Well, they're making more noise about it, but that's a really useful political tactic, especially right now. I think what they're able to do is they're able to name the problem. As we talked about earlier, oligarchy doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue, at least right now. And so what I think Bernie Sanders and AOC are trying to do is attach a vocabulary to the problem that I think a lot of people are feeling, but can't quite name it. Now, there are some concerns there because Bernie Sanders, kind of on this Fight Oligarchy tour, is not deviating from the same message that he's been proclaiming for decades. So the actual content of his message is not new. What's resonating with people is the alignment of that message with the political reality that so many people are feeling.
Okay, so given this new political reality, why do you think it is being left to one outlier in the Democratic Party and an independent to make more noise about this issue than the Democrats, when clearly this should be their finest hour?
He just has more credibility. He has been talking about concentrations of corporate power for decades, and he has built up kind of the messaging system that allows him to kind of get that out there in a way that resonates with people. I also think that the Democrats have a branding problem. Trump exploited that in the 2024 election. Democrats are struggling to connect with kind of ordinary middle class and working class people. And so in some ways, it's not surprising that you would need kind of this alien force, this force from the outside, especially when that force has much more kind of established credibility to talk about this particular issue, to come in and influence and shape the public conversation.
And so how much traction do you think they are having in terms, if we just frame this in terms of opposition to this administration, how much traction are AOC and Bernie Sanders and their followers having? Are they noisy outliers, or is there momentum?
There's definitely momentum. How that momentum is translated into pragmatic political policy, that we don't know. And that's another area where, if you are concerned with kind of the oligarchic effects of the Trump presidency, you can kind of take some optimism. You can be buoyed by what AOC and Bernie Sanders are doing. At the same time, they can't do it alone. And so what's going to have to happen is, if this Fighting Oligarchy tour gets traction, at least enough traction to kind of move along towards more pragmatic political gains, they will have to be accompanied by more mainstream, not just liberals, but more mainstream kind of political actors. They can't do it alone, in other words.
And of those mainstream political actors, the obvious people are the Democrats. Where are they? Do they have a plan to come back, to rebrand, to fight?
We don't know. And that's a problem. And part of the reason why Bernie Sanders' Fighting Oligarchy tour is attracting such attention is that it's filling a gap that the Democratic Party has been unable or unwilling to fill. I mean, here we are. We aren't talking about Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries right now. We're talking about Bernie Sanders. And so that's an indication that, at least in terms of studying the public conversation, they are filling a gap that's not being filled by kind of traditional, conventional Democratic Party operatives.
It's a fascinating analysis, and we thank you for it. Dr. Luke Winslow from Baylor University in the United States. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.